Next, we will have the report from our Budget Committee, which will be given by that committee's chair, Council Vice President Chuck Tai.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Budget Committee is bringing forward one item for approval today, which is approving a legislative directive related to financial reporting and practices. I will move approval of this item.
Vice President Chuck Tai has moved approval of the committee's report. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Koski.
Thank you, President Payne. The foundation of a functioning democracy is having access to unbiased information and staff who are funded by the taxpayers and our ability to then successfully do our jobs as council members. We just learned that the city of Minneapolis earned AAA credit rating for the second year in a row. This is very exciting. That does not happen without thoughtful, detailed, hard work from our staff. I'm looking forward to working with the staff on this legislative directive and getting continued clarity and detailed information. We have a meeting this Friday, and it's my hope we continue those conversations with all council members throughout the process of staff drafting the response to this legislative directive. Thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Mr. Chair, second quarter financial reports lack nuance. Hiring, major spending, invoices not yet paid. We don't understand yet what the impacts will be. This is a bad approach. I already pointed this out to this body at our council meeting on September 19th, and you passed the funding resolution for Agate anyway by a 10-3 vote. Now you're coming back and asking the administration to explain why the second quarter financial report wasn't accurate. We already knew this. We already knew that it was a snapshot for a moment in time. Budget Director DeSenda expressed grave concern to Councilmember Chavez that this was not the correct approach, and this happened anyway. The whole legislative directive here is some kind of gotcha, trying to put blame on the administration when it is 10 members of this body who did not do their due diligence. And now we are trying to make the administration take the blame for that mess. They shouldn't.
Councilmember Chavez.
Good morning, President Payne. I want to begin by thanking Council Vice President Chuck Tai and Councilmember Koski for bringing forward this legislative directive that will help bring transparency, oversight, and insight into the city's budget process. In this moment and in this particular time, this information is desperately needed for Minneapolis residents, and I'm excited to get this report back after this passes. I also want to address the underlying reasons why I'm supporting this particular legislative directive. Mayor Fry is deciding to move forward with retaliatory budget cuts to North Minneapolis, particularly to Ward 5 residents in the North Commons Park Improvement Project. This is happening as a result of his disagreements of this body taking action to save a shelter and helping prevent its permanent closure, an issue meant to address unsheltered homelessness and an issue that is disproportionately impacting the South Side in areas of concentrated poverty and areas where communities of color live in. I reject these false choices of having one or the other. We need both the North Commons Park Improvement Project, and we need to take actions, and we need, quite frankly, leadership to address unsheltered homelessness that is disproportionately impacting South Minneapolis. I refuse to be pitted against my neighbors in Northside. I refuse to accept tactics that put Northside residents against Minneapolis residents, and I will always stand for justice in this city. My commitment is to support my colleagues, particularly Councilmember Ellison, in any pathway that we move forward in to make sure that North Minneapolis isn't being impacted because of political games.
Vice President Chuck Tai.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to first start by thanking colleagues for providing input into how we move forward with the information we have received related to the administration's actions and cuts to programs and services as a result of saving a 139-bed shelter, 37-bed shelter facility from permanent closure. I believe our first obligation is to the residents that we serve, that we represent, who fund this entire nearly $2 billion enterprise, and place their trust in us to safeguard their money. Accurate and regular reporting is necessary, and it's mandated by our city's financial policies. It's critical for the council in order to execute on our responsibility of oversight and of budgeting in this city. It's been said or insinuated that because of this legislative directive, there wasn't due diligence done in the lead up to the alternative sourcing for the Agate downtown facility. And that's just it's not true. The purpose of this legislative directive is to use this council's charter right to information to understand why there are cuts to essential services, programs, and infrastructure projects when there exists money to pay for all of it. I think that as we move forward, as a body, it's my commitment to make sure that our residents are not pitted against one another, whether they live in Uptown, in Downtown, in South Minneapolis, or in North Minneapolis, or anywhere else in our city, and that taxpayer dollars are used to improve people's lives and are not used as a tool for political retaliation, frankly. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share some additional comments.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Mr. Chair, I heard Council Vice President Chug Tai suggest that we trust her and others to safeguard their money. And literally, at Budget Committee, Councilmember Koski said at the beginning that we had a $38 million surplus. We were all at the mayor's budget address, and I think that the public quickly loses all trust when people up here on this dais think such a thing, that we are operating with a $38 million surplus for this city.
Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Information is never bad. More information about how we can help govern the city, about how we can execute our role is never a bad thing. And I don't know why we sometimes argue up here about whether or not this council should receive information from the administration. It's within our right. And so I just want to make that clear. And, when my colleagues on the South Side move to address an issue, especially when it pertains to addressing homelessness, they're always going to have my solidarity in that. Now, when there was an initial proposal to use contingency, that wasn't supported by the administration. Changes to that plan, that wasn't supported by the administration. As somebody who generally feels like we're all up here operating in good faith, that feels like games to me. And now all of a sudden the North Side is affected, and now all of a sudden the sky is falling. That feels like political games to me. And so one way or another, when it comes to North Commons, if there are issues, I'll fix it. I'll expect everybody's solidarity in return. I'll fix the issue. But I'm not going to sit here and, as Councilmember Chavez, I think, highlighted, and play this game where Northside residents who deserve infrastructure, park infrastructure, are pitted against Southside residents who deserve access to a shelter and organizations who primarily serve the Southside who facilitate those services. And so, I just wanted to step in and say that I think that we can execute our mission as a council and as a body. Or we can play these games, or we can say Northsiders deserve infrastructure, or Southsiders deserve, an address to homelessness, and we can play these sort of silly narrative games about who deserves what, when we as a city, both sides of the city deserve it all. There was a pathway, it wasn't taken. And now we're here. And so I'm going to proceed forward. I'm going to stand in solidarity with my colleagues here. I support the legislative directive, obviously. And as we move forward and need to address North Commons, then we will address it accordingly.
Councilmember Osman.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to come back and just really remind us that we are under emergency, under crisis. Homelessness is real in city of Minneapolis. yesterday there was a large evictions under the bridges of City Riverside and Franklin by MnDOT in City of Minneapolis. So we continue to struggle with, homelessness in City of Minneapolis. Winter is coming up. Today we should be celebrating because we have a match of Agate Housing. We have a private donor who's came forward and said he's going to be paying, or she's going to be paying $1.5 million to match. So we should be celebrating. We should be out there right now. And I just really, not a good look for City of Minneapolis, instead of them being upfront and saying that, hey, here's the leadership. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to save shelter. We're going to have more shelters and more beds in the City of Minneapolis. Right now, it's just we're dealing with this and this conversation. So I expect and hope that the administration can step up and be the leader of the City of Minneapolis. Private donors are doing that, and it's necessary, and we must have more shelters. And I'm super glad that we are moving forward. And I want to thank the private donors and folks in Agate for their commitment to providing more beds for our city in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Councilmember Vita.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember, for saying that, we're looking forward to the future of how we make sure that North Commons gets funded. You and I had a good conversation about this yesterday. I want to say that, I know that North Commons is physically located in your ward, but it is the North Side Premier Park. And this work has been going on for 10 years. And I myself have hosted and co-hosted private fundraisers, also did work on the park board to make sure that this park gets funded for the community. So I appreciate Councilmember Chavez working with you, Councilmember Ellison, because it's physically located in Ward 5, but there's a lot of people in Ward 4 who are looking forward to this park and who've done a lot of work around organizing financially, sweat equity, all sorts of things to make sure that this park is the spot for all of North Minneapolis, not just Ward 5. Also, I don't know that it's about pitting against, for me, as much as it is understanding like the decision that is being made. I said several times the day we voted for Agate that it felt like it was too quick and maybe we needed a little bit more time to make sure. What happens, though, is people watch these meetings. And what has happened with this particular item is Northsiders believe that they've lost $350,000 on a project that they've been working on for over 10 years. People waited till their turn on the north side to get the $3 million allocation from the city of Minneapolis. There was no, I have a friend there and I'm going to go do an amendment. It's an emergency situation. We need this money right now. It didn't happen. People waited till their turn. So when these two items came up and it feels like it's one against the other, of course the north side feels like they lost out. And all they're doing is watching us here. They saw the action the week before. They saw the action the week after. So I caution my colleagues about how we make those decisions and like what people see when we make those decisions. So a lot of you may not have to navigate through what people really felt like was happening on the north side, but I know I do. And it's not easy to say to people that we may not have money for a project that you've been working over a decade to accomplish in North Minneapolis. If you're not from the north side, you don't understand that's the north side cry. This would not happen if it was the south side. I hear that if I had $1 for every time I heard that from a north side resident, I probably would be living on the beach and not a council member. So I just want us to think about that, like what people hear when we're having these conversations up here on the dais about projects on the north side, because this is the second time North Commons has been talked about. It was talked about in the Downtown Contingency Fund, and there was some misunderstandings about what was going to happen there. Some money got moved around. North Commons was talked about then, and then now this comes up in another action that's being taken by this council. So, again, I understand it's in your ward, Councilmember Ellison, but it's a north side park. And everybody over North cares about this park. Everybody wants to see this project finished. This is the park of all parks in North Minneapolis. Most of us have a history with this park, and we want to see it better. And so I don't want people to feel like we're compromising that in any way. So you're right. We're going to work to make sure whatever money we don't know where things are, but we're going to make sure that the North Side is made whole on this project by the end of this budget cycle. Yep. Thank you.
Councilmember Koski.
Thank you, President Payne. So when I read the 2024 second quarter financial report, I learned a few things. In terms of revenue, more than half the general fund's money comes from property taxes, special assessments, and state aid. The first payments are made in July, and the rest comes in December. Since a lot of this money comes in after the second quarter, the average money collected by mid-year has been only 20.5% of the budget. By the second quarter of 2024, the city has collected $124.8 million, which is 18.7% of the total budget. By the end of 2024, general fund revenues are expected to be $36.5 million, or 5.5% below the budget. The biggest cause of this is the use or drop-off of one-time public safety aid and franchise fees falling short due to low utility bills. In terms of expenses, overall, we're projected to underspend by $38.6 million, and the contingency fund of $23.2 million is planned to be unspent. All factors considered, the projected year-end general fund balance is $168.4 million, a decrease of $42 million from last year's end general fund balance. Our general fund target balance is $113.6 million. So even with this decrease, we will be $54.8 million above our target. This year's general fund budget may be projected to end at a deficit, but even so, our general fund balance is projected to end with a surplus. That's because we have a cushion of reserves on top of our cushion of reserves. Further, the city has strong historical financial performance. 8 out of the last 10 years, we've increased our year-to-year general fund balance. For the last 5 years, our fund balance has increased by an average of $27 million each year. For the past 10 years, by an average of $14.3 million. Last year, our fund balance went up $36.3 million. The year before that, by $54.8 million. Our financial situation is stable, despite the challenges we've seen with COVID-19 pandemic and with the fiscal cliffs we are seeing from federal and state funding. We have the capacity to spend $1.5 million on an emergency without disrupting the budget, and we have the capacity to spend $1.5 million on an emergency without putting the overall financial stability of the city at risk. That much is already clear from what I am seeing in the report that was given to us. The city's financial budget situation has been skewed and twisted to tell a different story, and it's our responsibility now to get that story straight. This legislative directive will give a clear, more conclusive picture of the second quarter financial report. It will show us program spending and spending by category, and it will show us the source of the projected saving. It will provide us the impartial, fact-based, transparent information that I just described that our amazing staff have the ability to give us that is necessary to put this back and forth to rest. Thank you.
Vice President Chugtai.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to just add 2 more things. Councilmember Koski laid out a lot of numbers as it relates to our budget and projections for this year, and I certainly trust our staff who put together these reports, who carry out the work of our budgeting process every year. And so it is a fact that the city is projected to have a $38.6 million surplus this year, and when something like that is happening, and we have we're projected to end the year with $168 million in our bank account. And there's a cut that's happening to a park that serves Northsiders. That's a financial commitment we made to the park board, money that they are counting on in order for the project to stay on track, that's an issue. So what I heard from colleagues today, particularly from Council Member Ellison and Council Member Vita, Mr. President, was an ask of solidarity, that this council stands with you in making sure that the North Commons Park Improvements Project is not harmed in any way. And so I just wanted to name that or respond to that ask and say, you have my commitment that we're going to find the money to make sure that this project stays whole in this budget year.
Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. I'm going to vote for this because I agree with Councilmember Ellison that the more information, the better. But we also have to realize that any surplus just goes to the bottom line for next year and helps us reduce the levy, reduce the taxes. So as we talk about surplus, that's an avenue for us to keep property taxes low. Thank you.
And then I'm just adding myself to queue just to echo some of the sentiments here. This item is about financial transparency. And I've heard a lot of, ascribing motivations in a number of areas. And I think there's room to ascribe motivations when there's an absence of information. When we don't know what's going on, people start filling in the blanks. And I think that this legislative directive is going to really help us fill in those blanks. I will also echo Vice President Chugtai and say I'm very committed to make sure that North Commons stays whole as well. And our constituents elect us because they trust our judgment on these decisions. And I just want to ground this in, we recognize homelessness as an emergency, and we wanted to use emergency funding to do that. And we had to go a different path. And the administration has elevated some impacts of that path. We want to get right down to the bottom of that so that we can use our judgment to make sure that those impacts reflect the values of our community. And so this legislative directive will give us the information to do that, to be that voice and advocate for what is important to our community. I believe that being compassionate in our response to homelessness is a core value of our community. I think that investing in the North Side in a historically redlined neighborhood. I grew up in Milwaukee, one of the most segregated cities in the country, at times the most segregated city in the country. It's a pretty profound thing to me to see how decision makers can easily find some other interest more important than Black people. That's a very easy thing for people who occupy these roles over generations to do. And every single decision that we make here is a decision of prioritization, and that prioritization is based on our values. And it is my value to close these disparities. It is my value to be empathetic and compassionate to our neighbors who are living outdoors. I think the majority of this body shares those values, and we're going to make decisions that reflect those values. And I think that this legislative directive is going to give us the information to make those decisions in the most informed way possible. And so with that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on the budget item associated with this legislative directive.
Councilmember Rainville.
Aye.
Councilmember Chavez.
Aye.
Councilmember Vita.
No.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Koski.
Aye.
Councilmember Wansley.
Aye.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Nay.
Councilmember Palmisano.
No.
Councilmember Chowdhury.
Aye.
Councilmember Cashman.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Aye.
Vice President Chugtai.
Aye.
President Payne.
Aye.
There are 10 ayes and 3 nays.
That carries, and that report is adopted.